meeting to order. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to welcome everyone to the school board meeting this evening. Remind you that we are live streaming the meeting tonight. So we'll start by accepting a motion to accept consent agenda items.
So moved.
I have a motion by Cheryl. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Kurt. Any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0. Next, we'll ask if anyone is present who would like to speak on any item on the agenda or any other topic. Hearing none, we'll go to old business under programs, certified staff evaluations.
Yes, I'm just asking for approval for the certified staff evaluations. There were no major changes this year. We made several changes last year, and we just continue to work with JCCTA to continue to improve it.
Okay. Well, I have a motion by Travis. Do I have a second? Second by Mary Lynn. Any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0. Enrollment update.
So I wanted to share the latest enrollment number. Now this would be as of last Friday, which is when we do official counts each week. We were at 3,486 students, slight uptick from last week. Last meeting. We do have in Panther Online Academy 16 students. And our PK program, which if you remember, we're piloting with a new pay structure for parents and seeing if we can be successful under that model. We have 17 students, so we were able to host a pre-K program this year, so we're excited about that. I do want to mention there's been a lot of conversation and topic driven about enrollment, and those are good conversations that people are having. And I want to kind of just remind everyone of the conversations we've had in the last couple of years about the declining enrollment and the impacts of that. So we have been matching our staffing by reducing staffing positions across the corporation in the last several years to try to reduce overall cost to match what our enrollment is. We still have some work that we can do in those areas, but we are starting to reach the staffing that matches the building footprints that we have. And as I have mentioned, this is not new information, but I just feel like we keep saying it for transparency's sake. That means that we are at a spot that we need to do a review on looking if a building closure is appropriate and needed. In addition to the fact of the lack of enrollment driving just that interest for us, there are state laws. I know I've mentioned these before, but there are state laws on building capacity, and we are nearing what that capacity number is, that we need to look at that for all buildings. So we are continuing with that work that we've been talking about. I'm just highlighting some of the areas that will be a part of that study this year. So we are working on a needs assessment for each building, which we have partnered with an architectural firm, so they will be able to share what are some ongoing costs that will be created for each building in the upcoming years. Transportation planning. There are rules about the amount of time for a student to be on a bus, and so if we look at redistricting or building closures, those will have to be complied with. So studying what that looks like as far as transportation goes. Looking at our enrollment with and without waivers at each building, because we have waivers for students from out of the county, and then we also have the availability of waivers for students within the county from school to school. So looking at enrollment in various different capacities. Studying our special programs, looking at what our current occupancy levels are per building, studying the operational costs per building. Our insurance and our utility rates, like everyone else, are rising, and so looking at what are those costs per building. Looking at a redistricting study, where is capacity available, looking at any adjacent facility, lands and grounds, and then finally financial aspects for each building, such as are the buildings part of a building corporation, or do we already own the leased land free and clear. So those are all some big topics, and they're going to require time and intensive study. We have started on that. We have some partners we're working with that are experts in some of those, but those will continue to be conversations that we have. But if there are any other areas that you want to add to that study, or you want me to make sure that we have as part of that work, please just let me know, and we will make sure to include that. And again, that will take us several months of work to do, but we have started looking at that process.
Anything else?
That's it.
Okay. Again, that item was an inform, so no action needs to be taken. If you have questions, get back with Nikki and so that we can get those answered. So next, on the agenda, under finance, we have Indiana School Funding presentation.
We do. So this connects with what I was just sharing. And when you have all these deep, heavy conversations, because we know our schools are our communities, they're important, they are such an essential part of what we do. But there are a lot of misconceptions about how money comes to schools and what it can be used for, such as if it can be shifted from one area to another, or from salaries to building needs. And recently, IASBO, which is the Indiana School Business Organization, put out a great 6-minute video that just explains school funding with all of the modern updates that have been done in the last few years and what funds can be used where. I thought just prior to our budget presentation tonight, it would be a great item to share, and I know we do have community members that watch the board meeting, so it's a way of kind of being able to share that with our community as well. So if you will indulge us in a 6-minute video on school funding, I know a lot of these facts are known to you, but it's a really great visual representation.
School funding in Indiana is a complex system that affects every student, teacher, and taxpayer in the state. Public school districts are funded by 3 main sources of revenue: state funds, local property taxes, and federal grants. State funding is the largest source of support for schools, accounting for about 60% of a district's total revenue. The more students a district serves, the more state funding it receives. But if a student leaves, the funding follows the student to their new school. Beyond the base funding for each student, Indiana provides additional support to help schools serve students who face greater challenges, including students with special needs and students from low-income families. Local funding, mostly from property taxes, accounts for about 31% of a school district's revenue. It's the second largest source of school funding. But Indiana law limits how much property tax can be collected. When those limits kick in, schools receive less money than planned, no matter what students' needs may be. At that point, districts are faced with a tough choice: cut programs and services, or ask their community to approve a referendum for additional funding. Federal funding is the smallest overall source for school funding in Indiana, making up an average of 9% of a school district's funding. State law requires schools to divide their funding into specific buckets. Each bucket can only be used for certain types of expenses. Because of this system, school districts may have funds available to replace buses or update facilities, but not enough to increase teacher salaries. In the next section, we'll break down what each of these funding buckets is designed to support. Let's start with the Education Fund. This is the largest fund in a school district's budget. It's funded by the state of Indiana and by law can only be used for expenses directly related to classroom instruction. These dollars primarily pay for teacher salaries and benefits, instructional aids, and other direct classroom expenses. In most districts, the vast majority of education fund dollars go toward the people who work directly with students every day. In short, this fund is dedicated to teaching and learning. But schools are more than just classrooms. Schools provide safe buildings for students. Buses need fuel and regular maintenance. The cost to heat, cool, and power our schools continues to rise. The supplies needed for day-to-day operations and the cost of insurance have also increased. That's where the Operations Fund comes in. While the Education Fund supports instruction, the Operations Fund keeps the schools running. And unlike the Education Fund, which is supported by the state, the Operations Fund relies primarily on local property taxes. Now let's talk about the third bucket, the Debt Service Fund. Think of this fund like a mortgage payment for a school district. When a school needs something major, like building a new school, renovating an older building, improving an athletic facility, or replacing aging HVAC equipment, it usually can't pay for it all at once. Instead, the district borrows the money. This is often done by issuing bonds. The Debt Service Fund is the account used to make those payments over time, both the principal and the interest, just like making payments on a home loan. Importantly, debt service fund dollars can only be used to make debt payments. Schools are not allowed to use this money for teacher salaries, classroom supplies, or other operating expenses. And just like the operations fund, the money for the debt service fund comes primarily from local property taxes. The last bucket works a little differently. It's called the referendum fund, and not every school district has one. Sometimes a district needs funding beyond what the state and existing local taxes provide. When that happens, the district can ask the community for approval through a referendum. A referendum is simply a question placed on the ballot. Voters decide yes or no on whether to allow the district to collect additional property tax revenue for a specific purpose. If a majority of voters approve the question, the district may collect that additional funding for a set number of years. There are three main types of school referendums. Operating referendums support day-to-day expenses, such as teacher salaries, academic programs, and classroom supplies. Capital referendums pay for building projects and facility improvements. And safety referendums fund security upgrades and other measures designed to keep students and staff safe. In short, a referendum gives the community the final say on whether to provide schools with funding beyond their standard revenue sources. School funding in Indiana is governed by state law, and each fund comes with specific rules about how dollars can be used. This means that even if the education fund has a surplus, schools can't simply redirect all of those dollars to pay for building repairs, transportation costs, or other operational needs. State law limits how much money can be transferred between funds and prescribes how most education dollars must be used. At the same time, the operations fund faces limits on how much schools can collect from property taxes, even as costs for transportation, utilities, and maintenance continue to rise.
School funding is under pressure from many different sources.
Rising transportation costs can reduce the dollars available for building repairs. Property tax caps can force difficult choices between updating classroom technology and maintaining school facilities. School districts work every day to balance these competing priorities, meeting today's needs while planning responsibly for the future, all within the limits set by the state.
So thank you for the time with that, and Deb is going to post that on the website. So as people have questions about how school funding works and are curious about how these types of decisions and conversations happen, it's accessible to anyone. It'll be posted online. I just thought it was a really great visual representation of how funding works for schools. And just pointing out, we do not have any referendums in Jennings County. That is one bucket we do not have.
Okay, next on the agenda is the 2027 JCSE budget. This is the second presentation.
Yes, so no changes from the last presentation, so I'm going to work our way through. Again, no changes from the last presentation. So the calendar remains the same. This is the second presentation, and we'll be asking later for permission to advertise. The same numbers on this slide, looking for funding supported by state and sales tax and income tax, and then the funds supported by local property taxes, just coming in shy of 15. Our 4 advertised funds coming in at the same amounts, $35 million for education fund, debt service with close to $6 million, $16.5 million for operations fund, and ask the $1 million in rainy day. Again, sorry if we go back one slide, advertising high, but it will actually be more like 52. Educational fund expenditures, areas that could be spent, are listed on this slide, and operations are listed next. Debt service fund budget, these are the things that fall into debt service. And then our cash balance history, and pointing out again, this is even seeing the decline even with us right-sizing staffing significantly in the last several years. Cash balance history as relates to different funds, then moving into our rainy day fund, which current balance is $2.7 million, the little additional. Debt service fund budget, 2027, looking at $5,885,617. advertising for $35 million for educational fund with an estimated actual coming in at $31.7 million. Advertising for operations at 16.5 with the actual coming in more at an estimation of 13.5. Reminder that the AV affects our budget, so based on if the AV goes up or down, that's what can impact our operations. That is an amount that we do not have yet certified, so that could change between now and the third presentation. You see on the next slide what it's estimated to be in 2027. So we're estimating an increase, but that isn't an official amount yet. Tax rate and tax levy correlate. So for example, if the tax rate is held constant, you can see what happens to the levy, and if it is not, what occurs. Indiana has some updates on property tax. Most notably, Senate Bill 1, used to be called, now it's Senate Enrolled Act 1, has had a great impact on how school funds operate. Our current tax rate is at 1.1937. Again, we advertise high, making sure that we can capture all the dollars that are available, and the actual comes in lower. So this was what we advertised in 2026 versus what the rate actually came in as. And so then you see in 2027, again, advertising higher and what we estimate the actual will be. Capped levies can have an impact on the operations fund. You see that there's not an impact on others. And then the final slide is the advertisement, and that is, again, the higher amounts that we advertise for that we would like to advertise. And I kind of mentioned the reminders as we went along. And so that is the budget, second presentation. Again, no changes from the first presentation that Philip did last meeting. Okay, to move on?
Yeah, go ahead.
Capital projects plan is next. Again, no changes from first presentation last meeting till now. You'll see the budget calendar, the calendar adoption cycle matches what we're doing for the budget. And you will see what the assets are and then what our estimates are for projects for 27, 28, and 29. And again, those are just estimates based on a list of needs that we know. When we have that architect information back of what they see as prioritization in the next few years, this might alter for future years. Any questions on the capital projects plan? No changes from last time. All right, moving on then. Bus replacement plan, again, no changes from last time. So the calendar and timeline is the same, and that goes along with the budget presentation timeline. And then you will see the summary of estimated costs for each year, finishing out lease payments we already have, and then estimating that by 2029 we might need an additional placement, so that's put into the budget, so additional bus at that time. Any questions about the bus replacement plan? Okay. Again, that was brief, but there were no changes from the presentation that Philip gave at the last meeting.
So the next item on the agenda is permission to advertise.
So based on that, asking for permission to advertise the budget for September 3rd.
So this would be advertising budget, capital projects plan, and bus replacement,
Thank
all
you.
three.
Yes,
So
thank you.
I will entertain a motion to approve. I have a motion by Mary Lynn. Do I have a second? Second by Cheryl. Any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0.
Thank you.
So next we move down under new business. We have some Neola policies.
This is just a first set of reading for this group of Neola policies. Please just reach out if you have any questions.
And that item is in form. We'll vote on those the next time. Next under programs, we have iRead 3 presentation.
Yes, this is going to be a little different than most years because I'm usually bringing you iRead and iLearn, but this year is a standard setting year for iLearn, so those scores are still in my ears embargoed. So I'm really excited to share this information with you because I think it's going to show the hard work that we've really put in the last few years with science of reading, that our teachers and staff and families. And the first graph's going to show you the last 4 years we've gone from 77% to this year is right at 93.7. So a 17% increase in those 4 years for iRead performance. The next graph then is going to show some of our subcategories. Free and reduced price meals and paid meals. As you can see, we're above the state average in both of those categories. And general education and special education also are above the state average in those. And then it just shows free and reduced price meals is 7.9 percentage points above. Paid is 3.9. General ed is 4.8. And one that I'm super proud of is our special ed is 16.6% above the state average in special ed. And then this is just a breakdown of our schools. 5 out of the 6 schools are above the state average of 88.7, and one is right there, right below that state average. And then, oh, that's it. So, like I said, really short, but I think a lot of good information, a lot of hard work that our students, staff, and parents have put in. We made an emphasis on science of reading and best practices over these last 4 years, and I think it's paying off, and we're seeing a lot of dividends.
And we're very grateful for our participation in the Literacy Cadre, which really leaned into science of reading quickly. And our staff just jumped into that with both feet and didn't have transition time, just made it work while learning it. And that allowed for this transition to happen so quickly. So kudos to our staff for being willing to try something new in best practices of instruction. And it's clear to see those results paying off. And like Carrie said, the most exciting part is it's across the board. It's not just one group of students, even in our subgroups of students, such as special education and those who may be struggling with poverty, we're seeing results above even state average. And the state's showing high gains themselves. So very significant, dear to our heart, and excited to see these results.
I think very impressive. I mean, what I would say is very impressive, especially in all categories, including the special education.
Super exciting.
Yeah, very exciting. This is an informed item, so we don't have to vote on anything, but what I would say is if there's anyone maybe present in the room who would like to tout that, this might be a really good thing. So if you have questions, get with Carrie. So next, under new business, we have results-driven accountability.
Yeah, so this is our kind of our special ed report card from the state. We usually do this middle of second semester. We were very late getting our data this year. So this data is actually from the 24-25 school year. So the way that it is broken up, there are 5 categories the state places school corporations in. We fall in that middle category with 2,501 to 10,000 students in a school, or in a school corporation. So we fall in that medium category. Then the state takes your scores and puts them from first to last, and then the top 20% gets 5 points, the next 20% gets 4 points. You'll see on our scores this year, there are some categories that were not scored, and I'm not really for sure why they weren't scored, but we do have some scores for them, but that's just a quick overview of how they're scored. Our score comes from 25% of our graduation rate, 20% is made up of our LRE school age, and then the other 55% comes from our assessments, iLearn, math, English language arts, growth, iRead, and our IM participation. So this is kind of the breakdown of our scores for the 24-25 school year, and you can see a few of them have scores, a few of them don't. We will break this down, and instead of looking at comparing us to other school corporations, we're going to look at how we've done the last 4 years. So we do have that information instead of relying on scores. We'll look at how we've done over the last 4 years. So this is iLearn percentage of students with disabilities performing at approaching. In 21-22, and this is math, 21-22 we were at 29%. 22-23, we jumped up to 31%. 23-24, we were at 37.8, and 24-25 to 39.3. So a 10% jump over those 4 years in math. For our math growth in iLearn, we had, so this is the growth percentile for students, the median growth percentile. So we were at 40 in 21-22. We jumped to 49 in 22-23. And then we've stayed steady the last 2 sessions at 23-24 and 24-25 at 50. We'll jump to English Language Arts, and I learn percentage of students with disabilities performing at approaching level. 21-22, we were at 30.3. 22-23, we had a dip to 26.2. We jumped back up in 23-24 to 33.7, and 24-25, we were at 31%. So 5% growth there in English Language Arts. And then for our growth with English Language Arts, in 21-22, we were at 41, 22-23, 43, 23-24, we are 50, and then we did drop a little bit to 46 in the 24-25 school year. And then students with disabilities passing iRead, in 21-22, we were at 75%. 22-23, we were at 55.4%. 23-24, we were at 79%, and 24-25, we jumped all the way up to 89%. And then the data that Carrie just showed for 25-26, we were at 88.3. So just a small drop, but we're still up in that high 80s range.
Okay, when we look at the alternative assessment and those, it's for our lowest 1%, the most severe disabilities. If you can look, the percent of students participating, we've went from 1.3 to up to 1.8. This does fluctuate, and because we do have a higher than average percentage of our students who do qualify for moderate and severe and profound, it's hard to get to that 1%, but we are still working to go through all of that information. The percent who graduated with a disability, from 21-22 at 58.3, up 22-23 we were at 71.8%, 23-24 we jumped to 82.6, and then for the 24-25 school year, 86.5% of our students with disabilities graduated. Our LRE code, there are codes that we use to describe how much time they spend in general education. The LRE code of 50 means they are in a general education classroom for 50% or more of their time, or 80% or more of their time. 21-22, we were at 92.9. 22-23, we dipped to 83.8% of our students were in general ed 80% of the time or more. 23-24, we were at 84, and 24-25, we're at 83.5. This does fluctuate based on the students we have and their needs, because we absolutely want to meet students where they are. And so if they're best served in a different eligibility area, a different LRE code, we want to put them where they're going to be best served. So that does dip occasionally. Our compliance grade, if we look, there's one that says there was a finding. Everything else was compliant, and the one that was the finding had to do with the changeover from the previous special education IEP program to the new one. There was a lack of communication between them for a little while, and that was fixed, and there was no finding, and so we were actually compliant in all areas. When we look at the data, if you look that we were timely in everything that we turned in, so we got 5s for all of those. And then meeting requirements, we are at level 1, meaning we're at that kind of that normal differentiated level of support. We let them know if we need something and extra steps for us to meet. And we have some of those things that were not scored. One of those was the IM proficiency. So students with disabilities that performed at proficiency or higher on the IM alternative assessment. In 21-22 in math, 70% of our students were at approaching proficiency or higher. 22-23 we had 69.2, 23-24 61.1, and 74.3% in the 24-25. And that does change. The alternate assessment is tested in grades 3 through 8, and then when they take biology at the high school level. And then in English Language Arts, same situation. In 21-22, we had 74.1% that were approaching proficiency or higher in English Language Arts. 22-23, it was 73.1. 23-24, 75%. and 24-25, we had a dip to 51.4% that were approaching proficiency or higher. Then we have here, it's the SAT, students with disabilities that performed at proficiency or higher at grade 11. 21-22, we were 8.7. 22-23, there was a dip. We got 4.4, and we dipped again in 23-24, but in the 24-25 school year, we saw a nice increase up to 10%. So we hope to see that continue to grow as well. And then SAT and English in reading and writing, we were at 13% in 21-22. 22-23, 11.1%, 23-24, we jumped to 17%, and then 24-25, we saw a dip to 13.3%. And this is approaching at proficiency or higher, and these are just the juniors in those years. So it's a different cohort of students each year.
For the next two, we're looking at getting a smaller number. This is the gap between students in general education and students in special ed and how they do on iLearn. So in 21-22, there was a 33% gap. And then by 24-25, we have closed that down to a 23% gap. So that gap is closing for our special ed students. And that is in math. And language arts, in 21-22, we were at 33.8, and the gap has closed to 27.7. So again, closing that gap, that is a good thing that we're bringing our students with special needs, bringing their scores up. And then the next chart, so one of the big focuses that we've been doing is trying to bring our special ed percentage down. We have dropped almost 100 students in special ed in the December 1st, 2025 count. However, with our drop in enrollment as well, that percentage still kind of stays steady. We are at 27%, which is a drop. It is coming down. We have had a lot of move-ins this year at the start of the school year, so we do anticipate that December 1st, 2026 count to be a little higher. And that is all of the data. Do you guys have any questions for us?
I would just like to reiterate and highlight that great success with the grad rate for special education students, going from 58% to 86% in a 4 years' time, and that's with the rigor rising at the same time, not using waivers. So that's exciting data, and seeing the gap closing between general ed and special ed in the testing data. So good work to the special ed department and all your staff.
I do have one question. I mean, most of those numbers are pretty consistent. They vary just a little bit, but a couple of them were like a 25% drop. Do you have any idea?
Yeah, so the IAM percentage, I think that might be the one you're talking about, the big drop there for English language arts. So that one is a concern, and that will be something that we focus on. So that would be our students who are taking the alternative assessment in our moderate and severe classrooms. So why that dropped? Because the math did not drop. So trying to figure out why that happened will be something that we talk with our special ed teachers about.
And we've been looking at the curriculum this year to see if there's anything that would be better suited to work on those skills as well.
The other one was percent of students with disabilities proficient, like it was in the 70s, and then 1 year to 55. I mean,
Yeah.
Any idea?
SAT does do a different, I think that was the SAT one, it's a different cohort.
Okay.
So because it's only measuring juniors.
Okay.
So the 22-23 iRead, that was the year that those students were in kindergarten during COVID. So that went down across the board. All students that took iRead that year went down. So that was that big drop there.
Any other questions? Okay, we'll move down the agenda then. We're under professional staff, extra contractual days for 2026-2027 school year.
Yes, please. Asking for approval for the extra contractual days for the following: Bradley Briggs, 30 days, Madeline Cardinal, 17 days, Gavin McKinney, 13 days, Jeffrey Green, 20 days, Morgan Brandeman, 10 days, Ashley Sedam, 15 days, Annie Poor, 8 days, Colby Vogel, 5 days, and Molly Vaughn, 6 days.
Entertain a motion to approve. I have a motion by Kurt, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Cheryl, any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0. So, next we have some recommendations.
Yes, please. Several new educational support tutors are new positions that are, have been posted. The following recommendations are asked for approval. Tammy Bates as Sand Creek Elementary as an educational support tutor in a split position. Floyd Bowman at Scipio Elementary as an educational support tutor. Tom Moore at Brush Creek Elementary as educational support tutor, and this will also be a split position. Susan Wallman, Brush Creek Elementary, split position with Tom Moore, and then Susie Webster, Sand Creek Elementary, educational support tutor on the other half of the split position.
Entertain a motion to approve those recommendations as read.
Motion.
Motion by Chelsea, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Mary Lynn, any discussion? All those in favor? 6. Next, we'll move down under support staff. We have some recommendations.
Yes, please, asking for approval of the following. Lauren Todd, Jennings County Middle School volunteer cross-country and track coach. Amber Butler, Northern Elementary parapro. Caden Scram, Jennings County Middle School lifeguard. James Hyde, Jennings County High School custodian. Logan Lovegrove, Jennings County volunteer flag football coach. Rick Monday, youth volunteer football coach. Leah Wright, Jennings County Middle School CMA in the SPED classroom. Grace Stark, Brush Creek Elementary, SPED parapro.
I'll entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Cheryl, do I have a second? Second by Chelsea, any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0.
Also asking,
Yeah.
yes please, also asking for approval for Corey Ritz, Jennings County Middle School assistant football coach.
So moved.
A motion by Travis, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Kurt, any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0.
Thank you.
Now we're down to finance. We have some donations.
Yep, asking permission to accept these donations for Graham Creek Elementary, Coffee Creek Christian Church, $250,000 to help, or $250 to help families. For Hayden Elementary, Hayden Baptist Church, $1,800 for teacher supplies. For Jennings County High School, for the orchestra, Dwight and Marissa Patterson, $50. Joseph Pearl and Natasha Goings, $10,000. And then Richard Vogel, $100 to the Panther Pantry. For Jennings County School Corporation, the Hope Food Program, Michelle and Robert Engel, $450. First Marian Baptist Church, $250. New Bethel Methodist Church, $450. And for North Vernon Elementary, Farm Bureau Ag Grants, $250 for new hydroponic tower and supplies, agricultural books, and Farm Bureau magazines. Asking for permission to accept those donations.
Entertain a motion to approve. Motion by Mary Lynn, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Travis, any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0. Next, we're now down under relations. We have an MOU.
Yes, it's time to update our MOU with the NDPD for SRO program. No significant changes to the MOU, just updates in the dates, so, and the language for the dates. Asking for that approval.
Entertain a motion to approve.
So moved.
Motion by Kurt, do I have a second? Second by Chelsea, any discussion? All those in favor? 6-0. Which brings us down to other.
I don't have any other. Great.
Hearing nothing else to come before the board, we'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Motion by Chelsea, do I have a second? Second by Travis. All those in favor?